What if I told you that the genetic code that builds every cell in your body holds an ancient secret? Gregg Braden claims there is a direct correspondence between the elements of DNA and the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, revealing that the very name of God is inscribed within you. Today, we will cross the bridge between science and spirituality to understand how this discovery challenges everything we know about life and shows us that we are, quite literally, the living expression of the divine. Perhaps you have already felt, even without proof, that something sacred pulses within you. Now, imagine discovering that this is not just a belief, but something recorded in the biological language that makes up your body. What changes when we realize that the I Am is written inside us? Before we dive in, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here, every week, we reveal truths that unite science, spirituality, and purpose, so you can remember who you truly are. Gregg Braden has investigated the relationship between genetic codes and sacred languages. By comparing the periodic table and the bases of DNA with Hebrew gematria, he identified an intriguing connection. Certain sequences of chemical elements correspond to letters that form divine words. This correlation echoes Kabbalistic teachings and opens a new way of interpreting what it means to be created in the image and likeness of God. Dirty human DNA is made up of 4 main bases: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, which pair together to form the spiral structure we know as the molecule of life. Each of these bases is composed of chemical elements such as carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen, and each element has a fixed atomic number on the periodic table. Through deep research into this structure, Gregg Braden noticed something surprising. When these numbers were converted using Hebrew gematria, an ancient system that assigns numerical values to letters, they corresponded to specific letters of the Hebrew alphabet. What he found was astonishing. Certain combinations of DNA elements formed words with profound spiritual meaning, including references to the name of God. This suggests that, more than a biological code, DNA could also be a message written at the core of life. Gematria, used for millennia to uncover hidden meanings in Scripture, assigns each letter a numerical value and allows for deep connections between words and concepts to be revealed. Applying this logic to the chemistry of DNA, Gregg found direct correspondences between combinations of elements and letters that form sacred names in the Hebrew tradition. This does not mean we can read DNA like a literal book, but rather that the fundamental structure of life carries symbolic patterns that transcend mere biology. It is as if each cell were a living letter, written by a creative intelligence, carrying within itself the signature of its origin. This discovery creates a fascinating bridge between modern science and ancient spiritual tradition. This correspondence draws attention because it unites 2 completely different systems: chemistry, which sees atomic numbers as immutable properties of matter, and gematria, which interprets them as codes for spiritual meanings. When 2 universes of knowledge so different converge with such precision, the hypothesis of coincidence weakens. It is like finding the same message written in different languages, separated by millennia and cultural context, yet holding the same meaning. This finding invites us to consider that perhaps life was intentionally programmed to carry, at its foundation, a divine message. The question that inevitably arises is, who or what could have left this code? If we see DNA as a language, then its 4 bases would be its alphabet, and chemistry, the grammar that organizes the word. Within this perspective, Gregg Braden's discovery becomes revolutionary, as it suggests that life is not the product of chance, but a text written with intention. This transforms genetic sequences into sentences that tell the story of creation, and every living organism into a chapter of this great book. Instead of seeing biology solely as a mechanism that generates forms of life, we can interpret it as a medium of conscious expression. This view radically changes how we understand our own existence and purpose. This connection does not aim to prove God in a traditional scientific sense, but it does demonstrate that matter and spirit may be deeply intertwined. If the name of God is inscribed in every cell of our body, It means we are not merely products of the universe. We are manifestations of it. This awareness can change the way we treat ourselves, others, and the earth itself. After all, if each cell is a particle of a divine message, then living, creating, and relating are no longer ordinary actions. They become acts of reverence. Under this light, life is no longer just survival. It becomes a sacred dialogue between creature and creator. Gregg Braden's discovery is not just a scientific curiosity, but a meeting point between areas of knowledge that have long walked separately. On one side, we have modern science, with its rigorous methods and concrete data about the composition of DNA. On the other, we have ancient spiritual traditions that attribute to the Hebrew alphabet and gematria a direct link to the divine. When we realize that both areas intersect in the very structure of life, it becomes hard to ignore the possibility that we are looking at a universal message. This code, present in all cells, connects modern man to the ancient spiritual masters and the truths they preserved. This bridge is even more impressive when we consider that the Hebrew language is one of the oldest still in use, carrying centuries of symbolism and meaning. Gematria did not arise as a numerical game, but as a method for accessing deeper dimensions of sacred text. By finding correspondence between it and the chemical composition of DNA, Gregg Braden shows that science can confirm intuitions preserved by spiritual tradition. This means we are not merely talking about linguistic coincidence, but about a pattern that transcends cultures, religions, and eras, and re-emerges with force in the context of contemporary science. From a spiritual perspective, this discovery reaffirms something many traditions have long claimed, that the human being is, in essence, a manifestation of divine consciousness. Science, in decoding DNA, reveals that this manifestation is not just in our minds or behavior, but physically engraved in the core of our biology. This transforms the phrase, "in the image and likeness of God," from a beautiful metaphor or philosophical concept into a reality inscribed in our cells, a constant reminder of our sacred origin and our creative potential. What is most fascinating is that this code makes no distinction between culture, creed, or ethnicity. Regardless of where you were born or what you believe, human DNA carries the same basic structure and, consequently, the same symbolic code. This means that we are all, on both a biological and spiritual level, connected by a common signature. This awareness can dissolve divisions and conflict, as it reveals that our essence is identical and that visible differences are only superficial variations within a much greater design. What unites us is infinitely deeper than what separates us. When science, spirituality, and ancestry meet, as in this case, we not only expand knowledge, but also recover something we have always known intuitively. This fusion gives us a new foundation for living more consciously and respectfully, both with ourselves and with the world. The divine code in DNA reminds us that we are part of an intelligent and intentional cosmic web. By recognizing this truth, we can align our choices and actions with the wisdom that gave us life, living not just as individuals, but as living expressions of a sacred whole. The theory of biological chance holds that life as we know it arose from random chemical reactions that, over time, led to increasingly complex structure. However, the discovery of precise correspondences between DNA elements and Hebrew alphabet letters strongly challenges this view. In statistics, the more complex and specific a combination is, the lower the probability that it occurred by pure chance. If DNA presents patterns that, when translated through an ancient system, form sacred names, we are dealing with a level of order that could hardly emerge from entirely random processes. It is like finding a perfectly written poem within an apparently chaotic sequence of letters. This argument is not based on subjective interpretations, but on concrete data. Atomic numbers are fixed and immutable, and the gematria system was established long before molecular biology existed. The fact that these two structures, independent in time and origin, overlap so specifically raises questions about the very origin of life. Either it was an extraordinarily unlikely coincidence, or there exists an organizing principle that inserts purpose into biological structure. For many, this principle can be interpreted as a creative intelligence, a consciousness behind the genetic code. The statistical improbability of this correlation is comparable to the odds of producing an entire book by randomly tossing letters into the air. In science, patterns with a high level of functional complexity are often seen as the result of intelligent design rather than blind processes. Although the concept of intelligent design is controversial in academia, Gregg Braden's discovery offers a concrete example that fuels this discussion. The presence of meaning within the structure of DNA suggests that life is not only the result of physical forces, but also of an informational principle that carries intention. By challenging the idea that we are merely the product of mutations and natural selection, this perspective also challenges the reductionist view of the human being. We are not just biological machines optimized for survival. We are carriers of a code that seemingly communicates something far greater than the mere function of sustaining life. This paradigm shift opens the door to new areas of research that unite biology, physics, mathematics, and philosophy in an attempt to understand not just how life works, but why it exists as it does. This narrative break is profound because it touches the foundation of our self-perception. If we accept that there is an intentional code within us, we can no longer live as if we were accidental. This implies responsibility, purpose, and connection to something greater. Rather than diminishing science, this vision expands it, allowing it to investigate not only the mechanism, but also the meaning. Life, through this lens, ceases to be a cosmic accident and becomes a meticulously crafted work of art, with every detail designed to reflect its divine origin. Gregg Braden has devoted decades to uniting fields that rarely engage in dialogue, cutting-edge science and ancestral spiritual tradition. By delving into molecular biology and Hebrew gematria, he found intersection points that reveal more than academic curiosities. They reveal an integrated narrative about the origin and nature of life. His work shows that, just as sacred texts preserve spiritual truths in symbolic language, DNA preserves universal truths in chemical language. The bridge he builds is not only conceptual, but also practical, enabling people from different beliefs and backgrounds to understand that there is a common code connecting everything. Analyzing ancient Hebrew texts, Gregg noticed that many described the creation of life as an act of divine speech, or word. When he compared this to biology, he saw that DNA is essentially a set of instructions, a chemical language that speaks to cells, telling them how to develop. This analogy is powerful because it shows that, at the most fundamental level, life and language are intrinsically linked. Just as a sentence conveys meaning, a genetic sequence conveys vital information. The parallel between the two worlds reinforces the idea that life is, indeed, a living text. Gregg is not alone in this vision. Many scholars of spirituality, science, and philosophy have explored the idea that reality is built from information. Quantum physicists speak of an informational universe, while spiritual traditions speak of the book of life. In this context, DNA would be one of the most sacred pages of that book, where each letter, each base, has both a functional role and a deep meaning. The bridge Gregg builds helps us see that science and faith need not contradict each other, but can complement each other in the quest to understand who we are. This integration is not only inspiring, but also challenging. It requires science to be willing to look at symbols and spirituality to be open to looking at data. Gregg exemplifies this by using rigorous research methods to investigate topics that have long been confined to the domain of faith. In doing so, he legitimizes a dialogue that should have existed all along. The dialogue between what we measure and what we feel, between what we can prove and what we can intuit. It is in this space that new discoveries and new ways of living can emerge. Gregg Braden's work also reminds us that if there is a bridge between DNA and sacred texts, that bridge is bidirectional. We can look inside our bodies and see God's signature, just as we can look at ancient texts and learn more about our own biology. This exchange of perspectives broadens our understanding of ourselves and invites us to live with greater awareness of the sacred value of life. After all, if the divine name is encoded within us, every gesture, word, and choice becomes part of a daily liturgy we celebrate simply by existing. Knowing that God's name may be encoded in your DNA transforms the way you see yourself. You stop seeing yourself as an isolated being, living by chance in an indifferent universe, and begin to recognize yourself as part of an intentional creation. This awareness changes not only your relationship with your own body, but with life as a whole. What was once only biology comes to be understood as embodied spirituality. You are not just an organism that breathes, but a living message, written by the very consciousness that originated the universe, carrying in each cell a silent reminder of your divine essence. This revelation also changes how you face challenges. If every molecule in you carries a sacred code, then every experience, good or bad, is part of an ongoing dialogue with the creative intelligence. Difficult situations stop being interpreted as punishments and start being seen as invitations to grow and deepen your connection with this source. Life ceases to be a random succession of events and becomes a process of refinement, in which you are simultaneously the work and the artist, shaping yourself according to a design you have carried within you from the beginning. The impact extends to relationship. If the divine code is present in every person, then every interaction becomes sacred. Looking at another person is, in a way, looking at a reflection of the same signature that dwells in you. This can transform the way we communicate, judge, and care for each other. We begin to act with greater empathy, respect, and awareness, because we recognize that harming another is, in some way, harming ourselves and the very principle that unites us. This type of change does not remain only in thought, but manifests in daily behavior. This new vision also calls for a life more aligned with higher values. When we understand that we carry God's name within us, it becomes difficult to justify actions that go against integrity, compassion, and truth. Each choice is measured not only by what is useful or convenient, but by what honors the divine signature we represent. This does not mean living with impossible perfection, but with constant awareness, remembering that every action leaves a mark on the great text of life we are all writing together. Finally, this revelation awakens a deep sense of purpose. You are not here merely to survive, pay bills, or follow a routine. You are here to uniquely express the code you carry. This purpose does not have to be grand in the eyes of the world. It just needs to be true in the eyes of your soul. Every gesture aligned with this truth, no matter how small it may seem, strengthens your connection to your origin and fulfills the mission you accepted when you came to this plane. And when you live this way, your existence stops being just another story in the universe and becomes an essential chapter in the eternal narrative of creation. Now you know, the code that forms your life may contain the signature of the Creator himself. This means that, in every cell, there is a silent reminder that you are more than matter. You are meaning, purpose, and the expression of a loving intelligence that has known you since before time began. Living with this awareness changes everything. How you see yourself, how you treat others, how you face challenges, and how you write your story. If this revelation touched your heart, like this video, leave your comment and subscribe to the channel. In our next meeting, we will explore another mystery that unites science and spirituality, one that can further expand the way you understand life and your role in it.